بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد إخوة الإسلام عباد الله. I'd like to take a look at the statement اجتمعنا على ما اتفقنا فيه ويعذر بعضنا بعضا فيما اختلفنا فيه. The statement is we gather upon that which we agree, and we pardon or excuse one another concerning that wherein we differ. Now, this particular statement is considered to be a principle with one of the contemporary and or estrayed groups, the group known as Ikhwan al-Muslimin. And this video in reality is not a video about the Ikhwan al-Muslimin per se, the group and how it went wrong and who started it and who was its shining spokesperson and things of that nature. This video is not for that. If a person wants a more in-depth understanding of the Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, then they should return back to the books of the contemporary scholars that have authored books as it relates to this group and its dangers. From them, this particular book, from the Mu'allafat of Sheikh Ahmed al-Najmi, this is Al-Mawrid Al-Adb Al-Zulal فيما انتقد على بعض المناهج الدعوية من العقائد والأعمال. And there is this particular book, the Sheikh goes in depth as it relates to the problems with this particular group. But when looking at this principle of theirs and understanding what is intended by it, then you get a glimpse of the dangers of this group. So again, this is a principle with them. This is not a principle in Al-Islam. And for this reason, you don't find this principle in the books of old or contemporary books as it relates to al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. You don't find it. It's absent from these particular sources. And that's because this particular principle, in reality, it stands in opposition to the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, especially as it relates to what the Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin intend by it. But when looking at this particular principle, because I want to read some of the statements of the A'imma or some of the statements of the contemporary scholars as it relates to why this principle is wrong. But before I read that, I want to just summarize what the principle entails and briefly state why it's wrong, and then read the statements of these scholars, and so that people will understand that this understanding how it's wrong and thus for so on is coming directly from the scholars. Now, this particular principle, if it's looked at in an unrestricted sense, then it's incorrect. And that's how the Ikhwanis look at it in an unrestricted sense, specifically as it relates to the second part, because this particular principle has in reality, there's two sentences. We agree, or we assist one another in that which we agree upon. First sentence. And then the second sentence, but we excuse one another in that which we differ. Now, this particular part right here, the second sentence, as the ulama explained, is where the problem lies if it's understood improperly. And the way that the Ikhwanis understand it is that they understand it in an unrestricted sense. So that would now mean that when we're looking at the various types of differing, that would now mean that two types will enter into that. Khilaf al-afham, differing as it relates to understanding, and khilaf al-tudad. And then the second type, this type of differing that is considered to be clashing with the text. When looking at their particular understanding of this of this so-called principle, or this portion of their principle, they enter both of those into it. Now, khilaf al-afham is when you find the masail of ijtihad. It's related to that. When something is not explicitly clear within the text. And so, something may be understood more than one way. And the scholars step to the particular mas'ala trying to derive or deduce what is correct from that. And as a result, there may be more than one statement concerning this one issue. And this is as it relates to ahkam, or this as it relates to ahkam, passing a ruling on something. This is halal, this is haram, this is sahih, this is da'if, and thus forth and so on. These are from the matters of ijtihad. So that would enter into it. But then likewise, this other type of khilaf at-tudad, would enter into it. And khilaf at-tudad is when a person literally clashes with the text. Because there are affairs in al-Islam that there is consensus. There's consensus. And now a person comes and he differs with that consensus. So now he consequently clashes with the text. And so the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, they enter both of these types of differing, or they intend both of these types of differing with that statement, we excuse and or pardon one another in that which we differ. And see, khilaf al-tudad, to enter that into this, then this consequently is very dangerous. The outcome to having this type of understanding is very dangerous. Because one, it can consequently change or transform Islam away from the way that Allah intends by allowing new and or innovative ideas to propagate amongst the people. Why? Because we're excusing one another on these things. And so now there is no enjoining good and forbidding evil. Now there is no nasiha. So if he curses Aisha or curses Abu Bakr or curses Umar or says something about Allah that is not found within the text of the Quran and the Sunnah from that which Allah says about himself or from that which the Prophet ﷺ affirmed for him, then we excuse one another on those issues. We don't deal with one another on those issues. We don't let that, quote unquote, divide us. And that's where the problem lies. Especially considering the fact that enjoining good and forbidding evil and nasiha are from the shining characteristics of a believer. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, Al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat, ba'aduhum awliya'u ba'adin, ya'muruna bil-ma'aruf, wa yanhawna 'anil munkar, wa yuqimuna as-salata wa yu'tuna az-zakata, wa yuti'una Allah wa rasulahu, ulaika sayarhamuhum Allah. To the end of the ayah. Allah says the believers, men and women, they are allies of one another. They what? They enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. The very first characteristic of these believers is that they enjoin good and forbid evil. They enjoin that which Allah has made obligatory upon one another, or that which Allah Ta'ala has made recommended upon one another, and they forbid evil. They forbid all of that which Allah Ta'ala has prohibited, and all that Allah Ta'ala has made makruh. This is from the hallmark or the distinguishing characteristics of a believer. Likewise, Allah Ta'ala, He states, لُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ وَعِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ ذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصَوْا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ. Allah states, curse were those that disbelieve from the descendants of Israel upon the tongues of Dawood and Isa, the son of Maryam, on account of their sinfulness and that they transgressed. لا يتناهون عن منكر فعلوه لبئس ما كانوا يفعلون. They did not forbid upon one another the munkar, the evil that they used to do, the opposition to the text or to revelation that they used to fall into. and how evil is the actions that they committed. How evil is the actions that they used to commit. And so we see, one, that the believer, he enjoins good and forbids evil. And then two, that the lack of enjoining good and forbidding evil, this is the very reason why prophets and messengers in the past cursed their people. Specifically in this verse, Dawood and Isa ibn Maryam cursed their people for not enjoining good and forbidding evil. But it has even graver consequences than that. We have an authentic narration that's collected by Imam at-Tirmidhi fi Jami'ihi, and it is upon the authority of Hudhayfa, where the Prophet ﷺ stated, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَتَأْمُرُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَتَنْحَوُنَّ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ أَوْ لَيُوشِكَنَّ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَبْعَثَ عَلَيْكُمْ عِقَابًا مِنْهُ ثُمَّ تَدْعُونَهُ فَلَا يَسْتَجِيبُ لَكُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ stated, you all will certainly can enjoin good and forbid evil, or Allah will send upon you a punishment from himself. He will send upon you a punishment from himself. Then you will turn to him, calling out to him, invoking him, supplicating to him. Yet he won't respond. Yet he won't respond. So this principle consequently would have the Muslims doing away with enjoining good and forbidding evil, doing away with giving nasiha. And for this reason, this particular principle is in reality a deviant principle based off how they intend, or what the Ikhwan al-Muslimin intend by it. And so as a result, if this particular principle was allowed to spread amongst the Muslims, it would cause what is considered to be a mafsada, a harm, or a disadvantage to the Muslims. Because when we look at the things that are considered sacred within Islam, we have deen, or the religion, nafs, the life, al-aql, the intellect, and nasl, the progeny, al-mal, the wealth, and al-ird, the honor of a Muslim. These things are considered sacred. And whatsoever brings about the establishment of these things, or brings about the preservation of these things, or as a means to the preservation of these things, then it is considered to be a maslaha. It is considered to be an advantage. It is considered to be a benefit for the Muslims. But whatever infringes upon these things, or does away with these things, threatens the preservation of these things, or as a means to threatening the preservation of these things, then it is a mafsada. It is a mafsada. It's a disadvantage. It's a harm. And from the underlying goals of the Islamic legislation is to achieve masalih. Masalih, the plural to maslaha, to achieve this benefit, to achieve these advantages. That's from the underlying goal of the Islamic legislation, and likewise to repair the mafasid, to repair these to repel these harms, to repel these disadvantages. And so when looking at understanding what is intended by the Ikhwan al-Muslimin by this principle, then this principle is a means to establish a mafsada in the deen. And so it has to be repelled. And so I want to read the statements of Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin, rahimahullah, and Sheikh Al-Albani for proper understanding concerning this particular principle. And so I took the liberty of translating their statements for several reasons. One, when I pre-translate, I'm able to word to come with a better translation as opposed to translating right on the spot. And then two, I don't want to be redundant reading the statement in Arabic and then translating it, you know what I mean? So we'll roll with the translation. So at any rate, Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, was asked about this particular statement or expression. So he says, yes, it's incumbent to assist one another as pertains to what we agree upon of aiding the truth. And that's only because Ahlul Sunnah are not going to agree with that what clashes with the truth. So other Muslims may come, if they agree with us in something, obviously it's in accordance with if we agree with them in something, it's obviously in accordance with the text. And this is obvious. So he continues, inviting others towards it and warning from whatsoever Allah and His Messenger prohibit. As for excusing each other, now he's dealing with the second part. As for excusing each other in that which we differ, that this is not in the unrestricted sense. Now, this is very important what the Sheikh is saying, because the Ikhwan al-Muslimin look at it in an unrestricted sense. So they bring in khilaf al-afham and khilaf al-tudad under this meaning, under one umbrella. So he said, we don't look at it in an unrestricted sense, like the Ikhwanis do. On the contrary, it's a detailed circumstance. Thus, whatever is from the affairs of ijtihad, in which its evidence is obscure, in that case, lack of reprimand is obligatory upon each other as pertains to that. And this is, again, the matters of ijtihad in which it is allowed to differ because the text may be pointing to more than one way, or due to the lack of text that explicitly states this or that. He continues, as for what opposes the text, yani that which is considered consensus, as for that which opposes the text of the book and the sunnah, yani that which opposes the consensus once again, then recommendation on the one who opposes the text with wisdom, good admonishment, and argumentation with what is best is compulsory. It's compulsory. So when a person opposes the consensus, specifically the consensus of the companions, as it relates to the text, as it relates to the creed, and yani actions, whatever opposes that, then reprimandation is held in that regard, and we don't excuse one another concerning these affairs, because that is literally to clash with the text. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin, when asked about this, he states, their statement we assemble as pertains to what we agree in. He states, this is the truth. As for their speech and excuse one another in that which in that with which we differ, then within this issue is detail, yani particularization. So whatever issues were therein, ijtihad is allowed. In this particular case, we pardon one another therein. Again, he's pointing out the same thing, affairs of ijtihad in which the scholars may differ, passing a ruling on something or even on someone. These are from the affairs of ijtihad. So he continues, however, it is not permissible for the hearts to differ on account of this. So he goes back. The affairs of ijtihad in which it is allowed to differ, that's when one pardons one another. That's what we pardon each other on. But our hearts shouldn't be at odds with one another because this one holds a different position than you may hold. He continues, as for if ijtihad is not allowed in an issue, then we do not excuse whomsoever differs therein, as it is mandatory for the person in opposition to humble himself to the truth. Hence, the first part of the expression is correct. As for the last part, it needs something of detail. Why? Because it's not understood unrestrictedly. Now notice, as Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin basically had the same exact understanding as Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Baz. And now we go to the statement of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al Albani, where he says, we have, after being asked about this, we have no doubt that that a portion from this expression is correct, meaning we assist one another in that which we agree upon. The first sentence, of course, it's adopted from the exalted statement, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, and assist one another upon righteousness and piety. As for the other sentence, it being we excuse one another, then it is a must, it is restricted or confined. It is a must that this statement is restricted or confined. When? Now the Sheikh is asking, when is it restricted? When is it confined? While giving mutual advice and or consultation. So we say to he who erred, you are mistaken and the evidence is this and that. If we see that he's convinced and we feel that he's sincere, then we leave his affair. Thus we assist each other as relates to what we agree. As for if we see him to be rebellious, arrogant, and he turns away from the advice, in this situation the expression is not correct, and we do not excuse each other in that which we differ. Now, of course, once again, Sheikh Al-Albani, for better clarification of what he means by that, you go back to the other two statements of the other two scholars. And that is as it relates to affairs of ijtihad, we excuse one another in this regard. Where the evidence is obscure. It may point to more than one thing. And one person sees this to be stronger, or one scholar sees this to be stronger, another scholar sees something else to be stronger. Or there isn't enough sufficient evidence to determine clearly this or that. And so there's a lot of deduction from the text. In these types of affairs, that's when we excuse one another. But when we go to affairs where there is ijma' amongst the companions, ijma', consensus, regardless if it's from the creed or other than that, then there is no room for differing in this regard. On the contrary, the person has to follow the text. And if he differs in that regard, he's in opposition, meriting that he be advised, that he be reprimanded, that the good is enjoined upon him and the evil is the evil is warned against. There is some type of disapproval. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala states, وَمَنْ يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Whoever differs with the messenger after the guidance has been made clear to him and follows a path other than that of the believers, and what's being referred to here by believers, or those people that were there when this verse was revealed, meaning the companions, whoever follows a path other than their path. So that which they have consensus of, that is their path. Whoever comes against the consensus that they had clashes with their path. So, and follows a path other than that of the believers, then we will leave him to where he has turned himself, and we will roast him in the fire or with an evil destination. So this clarifies how this particular statement or expression of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin is incorrect. Why? Because they're understanding it in an unrestricted sense. But if it's understood the way that these scholars understood it, by restricting the second portion to the affairs of ijtihad, regardless of what affair it may be, then it will be considered correct. We excuse one another, we pardon one another in that which we differ in, as it relates to khilaf al-afham. And that's it. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. And with that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.